Every night you disappear, and yet in the morning you return. Your body lies still, your thoughts fall silent, and the familiar sense of me fades away. Where does consciousness go when you sleep? And who is it that wakes up again? Perhaps sleep is not a loss of awareness, but a doorway into something far deeper. Consciousness doesn't travel anywhere. When we ask the question, where does your consciousness go when you sleep? We are already assuming something that may not be true. We imagine consciousness as a thing, like a traveler that leaves one place and goes to another. We picture it switching off, drifting away, or sinking into darkness. But this image comes from misunderstanding what consciousness actually is. Consciousness is not an object moving through space. It does not have a location in the way your body does. It is not inside your head in the way a thought or a memory might be. Consciousness is the field in which all experiences appear. Just as the screen does not move when a movie changes scenes, consciousness does not go anywhere when waking turns into sleep. During the day, consciousness appears filled with sights, sounds, thoughts, and sensations. At night, these activities quiet down. The mind stops telling stories. The sense of, I am doing this slowly fades. But this does not mean consciousness has vanished. It simply means the contents of consciousness have changed. Alan Watts often used the example of space in a room. When the furniture is removed, the space does not disappear. In fact, it becomes more obvious. In the same way, when thoughts and perceptions fall away in sleep, consciousness does not leave. It becomes empty of objects. What remains is not nothingness, but openness. This is why the idea of unconsciousness is misleading. If you were truly unconscious, completely absent, you would not wake up refreshed. You would not have the sense that time passed peacefully. The fact that you recognize having slept suggests that something was there all along, quietly aware, though not actively thinking. Deep sleep is not darkness, it is silence. And silence is not the absence of sound. It is the space in which sound can arise. Consciousness in sleep is like a calm ocean with no waves. Nothing is happening on the surface, yet the depth remains vast and alive. We struggle with this idea because the mind equates awareness with activity. If there are no thoughts, no images, no sensations, the mind assumes there is nothing. But awareness does not depend on activity. In fact, activity depends on awareness. Sleep gently reveals this truth every night. Understanding this changes how you relate to life. You realize that awareness is always present, even when you are not managing it. You don't need to hold on so tightly during the day, because the same intelligence that carries you through sleep is carrying you through waking life as well. Nothing essential leaves you at night. You do not disappear. You simply rest as what you truly are, before names, before roles, before effort. Have you ever noticed the peaceful quality of deep sleep, beyond dreams and thoughts? Share your experience in the comments. How does this perspective change the way you think about consciousness? The ego falls asleep first. Every night, something very familiar quietly disappears, and yet we rarely notice it happening. The thoughts slow down, the inner voice softens, and the constant sense of me gradually fades into the background. What falls asleep is not awareness itself, but the ego. The idea of being a separate individual managing life from behind the eyes. The ego is not an enemy, it is a useful tool. It helps you navigate the world, remember your name, plan for tomorrow, and respond to challenges. But it is also restless. It compares, judges, worries, and constantly tries to maintain control. When the day ends, this mental activity finally grows tired. Sleep arrives, not because you force it, but because the ego can no longer keep up the performance. Alan Watts often described the ego as a social role, rather than a solid entity. It is a pattern of habits, memories, and expectations learned over time. In deep sleep, these patterns are temporarily set aside. There is no name, no personal history, no ambition to protect. And yet, something remains, This is the great clue sleep offers us. If the ego were truly who you are, its disappearance would mean you disappear, but you don't. You wake up in the morning refreshed, aware and present. This suggests that the ego is not the source of consciousness. It is one of its expressions. Notice how effortless this process is. You don't decide to turn off the ego. You don't negotiate with it or slowly dismantle it. Sleep simply happens. The mind relaxes its grip, and awareness remains without the story of me. This is why many spiritual traditions see sleep as a teacher. It shows you every night that life continues perfectly well without your constant self-management. In deep sleep, there is no sense of being separate from the world. There is no observer standing apart from experience. This absence is not frightening, it is deeply peaceful. The fear only appears when the ego imagines its own absence while awake. In sleep, the ego has no voice to protest. Awakening is not about destroying the ego, but understanding its place. Sleep demonstrates that you can exist without identifying with every thought and role. The ego is a function, not a master. When you see this clearly, its grip during waking life naturally loosens. You begin to live more lightly. You take your roles seriously, but not personally. You allow thoughts to come and go without believing they define you. And just as in sleep, you discover that awareness does not need constant effort to be present. The ego falling asleep is not a loss. It is a reminder that who you are is deeper than the story you tell yourself during the day. Have you ever noticed the relief that comes when the mind finally quiets before sleep? Share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think remains when the ego rests? Sleep reveals the illusion of control. Every night, without effort or instruction, life continues perfectly well without you. Your heart keeps beating, your lungs keep breathing, and your body repairs itself while you are nowhere to be found. Sleep quietly exposes a truth that the waking mind often resists. You are not running the show as much as you think. During the day, the ego assumes responsibility for everything. It believes that if it stops paying attention, things will fall apart. It plans, organizes, worries, and rehearses, convinced that control equals safety. Yet the moment sleep arrives, this sense of control dissolves completely, and nothing goes wrong. Alan Watts frequently pointed out that the universe is not a machine that needs a manager. It is a living process that knows how to operate itself. Sleep is your nightly demonstration of this principle. When conscious control relaxes, the deeper intelligence of the body and mind takes over effortlessly. Consider how strange this really is. You do not tell your heart when to beat. You do not instruct your cells how to heal. You do not supervise digestion or regulate every breath. These processes function with astonishing precision, guided by an intelligence far older and wiser than conscious thought. Sleep reveals that this intelligence does not belong to you. It is you, operating beyond the ego's awareness. The illusion of control becomes most obvious when we try to fall asleep. The more you attempt to force sleep, the more awake you become. Sleep arrives only when you stop trying. This is a perfect metaphor for awakening itself. The moment you let go, what you were seeking naturally appears. This realization can be unsettling. If you are not in control, then who is? The answer is not another hidden entity, but the total process of life itself. You are not a commander giving orders. You are a movement within the whole, like a wave in the ocean. The wave does not push the ocean forward. It is the ocean moving. Understanding this changes how you relate to life's challenges. You begin to trust the process rather than fight it. You act when action is needed, but you no longer carry the exhausting belief that everything depends on you. Just as sleep restores the body, surrender restores the mind. Sleep teaches surrender without philosophy or effort. It shows you that letting go is not dangerous, it is necessary. And once this is seen, waking life can be lived with less anxiety and more grace. Have you noticed how life continues perfectly while you sleep? Share your thoughts in the comments. How does this change your relationship with control and trust? Dreams are consciousness at play. Each night, as the body lies still and the thinking mind loosens its grip, Entire worlds appear out of nowhere. Cities rise, people speak, stories unfold, and all of it feels real while it is happening. Dreams reveal something extraordinary. Consciousness does not need the outside world in order to create experience. It is creative by its very nature. In waking life, we assume that the world we experience comes from out there. Light enters the eyes, sound enters the ears, and consciousness merely receives these signals. Dreams quietly overturn this assumption. In dreams, there is no external input, yet sights, sounds, emotions, and events arise with vivid clarity. The mind becomes both the stage and the audience. Alan Watts often described dreams as evidence that consciousness is fundamentally playful. It is not merely a passive observer, it is an artist, endlessly shaping form and meaning. When you dream, you are not watching a pre-recorded film. You are actively creating the experience in real time, without effort, intention, or control. What makes dreams especially fascinating is that the dreamer rarely realizes they are dreaming. The dream world feels convincing because consciousness temporarily forgets its own creative role. In this way, dreams mirror waking life. We move through the world, assuming it is solid, fixed, and independent, rarely questioning the role consciousness plays in shaping our experience of it. Dreams show us that reality is not as rigid as it seems. The same awareness that constructs dream worlds also interprets waking life. While waking reality has consistency and shared structure, our experience of it is still filtered through perception, memory, and meaning. Dreams remind us that consciousness is always participating, never merely observing. There is also a deeper lesson in how dreams dissolve. You do not exit a dream by force. It fades naturally, without resistance. One moment the world is vivid and intense, the next it is gone. Consciousness remains untouched by the story that just ended. This gentle transition teaches impermanence. Experiences come and go, but awareness itself does not cling to them. Some traditions suggest that awakening is like becoming lucid in the Dreya, of life, not in the sense that life is unreal, but in the sense that it is fluid, dynamic, and deeply interconnected with awareness. When you recognize consciousness at play, life becomes less heavy. You take experiences seriously, but not literally. Dreams are not distractions from reality. They are lessons about it. They reveal the creative, flexible, and intelligent nature of consciousness, qualities that are always present even when unnoticed. Have you ever had a dream that felt more real than waking life? Or a moment of lucidity within a dream? Share your experience in the comments. What did it reveal to you about awareness? Deep sleep is pure being. There is a phase of the night so quiet, so empty of activity, that the mind can hardly imagine it. In deep sleep, there are no images, no thoughts, no dreams, and no sense of I. And yet this state is not frightening or disturbing. In fact, it is profoundly peaceful. When you wake, you often say, "I slept deeply," as if you were somehow present there. This simple statement carries a deep insight. In deep sleep, all distinctions disappear. There is no subject observing an object, no thinker thinking a thought, no experiencer experiencing experience. From the perspective of the waking mind, this looks like nothingness. But from within it, there is no lack, there is no complaint, there is only rest. Alan Watts often pointed out that if deep sleep were truly a void, it would be terrifying, yet people look forward to it. They crave it after a long day. This suggests that something profoundly nourishing is taking place. The peace of deep sleep is not the result of unconsciousness, but of the absence of conflict. The mind usually assumes that awareness requires content, something to focus on, something to know. Deep sleep reveals the opposite. Awareness does not need objects to exist. It is complete in itself. When all mental activity subsides, awareness rests in its own nature, undisturbed and whole. This is why deep sleep feels so restorative. The exhaustion we carry during the day is not just physical, it is mental tension. the effort of maintaining identity, preferences, and control. In deep sleep, this effort stops. There is no one trying to manage life, and so life flows effortlessly. Some traditions describe deep sleep as a glimpse of our true nature, not as a mystical experience, but as a natural state we enter every night. The problem is not that we lack access to this state, but that we overlook its significance. We rush past it in the morning, returning immediately to thinking, planning, and doing. Awakening does not mean remaining in deep sleep. It means bringing the peace of deep sleep into waking life. It means recognizing that the stillness you touch at night is always present, even during activity. Thoughts and emotions arise and fall, just as dreams do, while being Rema. Ins unchanged, deep sleep teaches us that we do not need to become anything to be whole. We only need to stop trying so hard to be someone. In this sense, deep sleep is not an escape from life, it is a return to the foundation of it. Have you ever noticed the deep peace that follows a night of truly restful sleep? Share your thoughts in the comments. Does this perspective change how you see rest and awareness? Waking and sleeping are movements of the same mind. We often think of waking and sleeping as complete opposites, one state filled with awareness and activity, the other defined by absence and rest. But this division is something the thinking mind creates. In truth, waking and sleeping are not separate worlds, they are different movements of the same consciousness, rising and falling like waves on the surface of a single ocean. Alan Watts frequently reminded us that nature does not work in rigid categories. Day flows into night, sound fades into silence, inhalation becomes exhalation. In the same way, waking gently dissolves into sleep, and sleep gives birth to waking again. There is no sharp boundary where one ends and the other begins. Consciousness simply changes its rhythm. When you wake in the morning, awareness does not suddenly switch on. It was already there, quiet, undisturbed, without content. Likewise, when you fall asleep, awareness does not shut off. It withdraws from surface activity. What changes is not consciousness itself, but what consciousness is expressing. This misunderstanding leads us to believe that we lose consciousness in sleep. But if that were true, you would wake up as a completely new person, disconnected from the night before. Instead, there is continuity. You recognize that you slept. You feel rested. Something remembers the absence of experience, which means awareness never truly disappeared. Waking life is consciousness focused R2W. Odd, engaged with sights, sounds, thoughts, and interactions. Sleep is consciousness turned inward, resting from form, content, and effort. Both belong to the same field. One is not superior to the other. Each gives meaning to the other, just as sound makes silence noticeable, and silence gives depth to sound. This realization softens our relationship with life. We stop treating sleep as a shutdown and waking as a struggle. Instead, we begin to see them as complementary expressions of being. Just as the heart beats and rests in rhythm, consciousness alternates between engagement and stillness. Awakening, in this sense, is recognizing the continuity beneath these shifts. You begin to sense the same awareness present while thinking, dreaming, resting, and acting. The world feels less fragmented. Life feels less divided into on and off, me and not me. When this understanding deepens, you carry the peace of sleep into waking life and the clarity of waking into rest. You no longer cling so tightly to activity or fear stillness. You trust the rhythm, knowing that consciousness knows how to move itself. To awaken is not to remain awake forever, nor to escape into sleep, but to recognize the unity that flows through both. Have you ever noticed the gentle transition between waking and sleeping? That quiet moment where neither fully dominates? Share your experience in the comments. Your reflection may help others sense the continuity of awareness. You were never truly unconscious. Each morning you say it so casually, I slept well. Rarely do we pause to consider what this implies. How can you say you slept peacefully if you were truly unconscious? Who exactly knows the quality of that rest? This simple observation points toward a profound truth. Awareness never fully disappears, even when experience itself fades. We often imagine consciousness as a light that switches off at night and turns back on in the morning. But if this were the case, there would be no sense of continuity. You would fall asleep as one person and wake as another, with no bridge between the two. Yet you wake with a subtle certainty that you were there, resting. Alan Watts frequently challenged the idea that consciousness depends on thinking. Thinking is only one activity within awareness, not its source. When thought stops, awareness does not vanish, it becomes silent. Deep sleep is not the absence of consciousness, but consciousness without content. This is why deep sleep feels refreshing rather than disturbing. If it were total oblivion, it would be frightening. Instead, it is nourishing. The mind rests because it is no longer busy maintaining an identity, defending opinions, or solving problems. Awareness relaxes into itself. Notice that when you wake, you do not experience a gap. There is no moment of panic where you wonder if you have just come into existence. There is a smooth return, as though consciousness had simply been waiting quietly in the background. This suggests that awareness is not created by experience. It is the condition that allows experience to arise. This insight has deep implications for how we relate to fear, especially the fear of disappearance. If awareness does not vanish in sleep, perhaps it is not as fragile as we imagine. Perhaps what we truly are is not bound to constant activity or memory. Awakening, then, is not about gaining something new. It is about recognizing what has always been praised. Sleep offers us this lesson every night, but we rarely reflect on it. We hurry back into thought, missing the quiet wisdom that rested with us in the dark. When you realize you were never truly unconscious, life feels less urgent and less threatening. You begin to trust the deeper ground of being beneath every experience. Have you ever reflected on the feeling of continuity between sleeping and waking? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your insight might help someone else recognize this quiet presence. Awakening is learning from sleep. Sleep is one of life's most mysterious teachers. Each night, as the body rests and the mind quiets, we enter a world where our usual sense of control, identity, and activity dissolves. And yet in the morning, we awaken refreshed, whole, and ready to engage with life once more. Sleep quietly shows us a truth that the waking mind often resists. Awakening is not about adding something new to ourselves. It is about learning to live with the same clarity and surrender we experience in deep rest. When you fall asleep, the ego relaxes and the constant chatter of the mind stops. Thoughts fade, worries disappear, and the illusions of control dissolve. For a few hours, you are not managing life, you are allowing life to carry itself. In this effortless state, awareness continues without the interference of identity. You do not need to push, strive, or plan. And yet, when you wake, you discover that all has been maintained perfectly. The heart still beats, the lungs breathe, and the body is nourished. Alan Watts often emphasized that the lessons of sleep extend far beyond the night. Waking life is not separate from the states of awareness you touch in rest. It is a continuation. The peace, trust, and effortless presence found in sleep are already within you. Awakening is simply learning to bring these qualities into your daily life, without linging, without judgment, without forcing. This is easier said than done, of course. The mind is trained to resist stillness. It measures time, tracks results, and insists that survival depends on constant effort. Sleep challenges this illusion. It demonstrates that existence flows naturally, whether the ego is actively directing it or not. The lesson is subtle but profound. Control is not the source of life. Awareness is. Life thrives not because you force it, but because it is already alive. Dreams and deep sleep also teach us impermanence. Experiences arise and dissolve. The story of the self pauses and returns. This rhythm mirrors waking life. Everything you cling to, identity, opinion, attachment, is transient. Yet the awareness that witnesses these changes remains constant. By observing sleep, you glimpse this deeper truth. You do not need to hold on to appearances to remain whole. Awakening, therefore, is not about escaping life or achieving a special state. It is about seeing what is already present, the awareness that quietly underlies all experiences. It is about moving through life with the same calm, trust, and openness you touch each night in sleep. The ultimate teacher is not effort, technique, or philosophy. It is the simple, natural rhythm of resting and waking. As you reflect on your own experience of sleep, consider how you might bring its effortless clarity into waking life. Share your thoughts in the comments. How does the rhythm of sleep inspire you to live more fully and consciously?